Okay, my name is Bill Blum. I have a company, Alpine Business Systems. We met you at the BizFest, and we manage technology for small, medium, and some pretty large businesses. And cybersecurity is our #1 priority, and I do a lot of these educational seminars. I started doing it about 10 or 12 years ago, and I couldn't find anybody to listen to me back then. and now I do several every month, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. Hopefully you're going to get scared and alerted and aware of things you weren't aware of before as to what's going on out there in the world. But it's a topic we all know, we see every day in the news. So, but at the end of the day, there's some good news. So, everybody tells me they're pretty shocked when they see this presentation, but hang on, at the end of the day, there is some good news. So the real problem we have is that the human factor is our weakest link, and that was said by Kevin Mitnick. He's a convicted cyber criminal, one of the most notorious ones. And you want to get that? Or
Yeah, she's on speaker.
Okay.
Yeah, you can keep going.
Okay.
Hello there.
Hi there. And you can follow along on this presentation if you want by going to alpinebiz.com.
I actually have it up.
Okay, great. All right. So we're on, I think, slide 3, which is the real problem. The human factor is truly security's weakest link. And that was said by Kevin Mitnick. He's a notorious convicted cyber criminal, did time actually in a federal penitentiary. And he now has a business where he teaches people about cybersecurity.
Wow.
So he actually has subscriptions to his training seminars like this and whatever.
Oh, good business plan.
So the goal of all of our cybersecurity policies and procedures is to find an acceptable balance between functionality, usability, and risk. The only way to be totally secure is not connect anything to, not to connect to anything. So there are systems out there that are not connected to the internet, not connected to anything out there. And they do manufacturing for pharmaceutical drugs, defense systems, you can imagine. Those things cannot be hacked. So they're not connected to anything because they need to be so safe and secure. But as we know, it's impossible to do that in most businesses these days. The magnitude of the threat is pretty severe. If Hackers Inc. was a company, they'd be #1 on the Fortune 500, 74 times the size of Walmart. That's how much they steal out of the world economy every single year.
Wow.
In 2016, more than half of us had our personal information stolen by hackers, primarily through large data breaches at large companies. That number, they say, this year is probably going to go up to about 65 or 70%. So well more than half of us already have our information out there in the hackers' hands. Average cost of a breach is about $3.8 million. The United States leads in the cost of these breaches, and that's because these ransomware attacks, which we'll talk about, they ask people to pay like $100, $300. But the cost for Sony when they got breached several years ago was in the billions of dollars it cost them. Now, here we go again, the human factor. 90% of all breaches in 2015 were caused by human error or carelessness. Now, we're always going to have human error. I mean, healthcare worker mistypes a patient's name, and suddenly somebody else at Gmail gets patient record or information on another patient. That's always going to happen. We can try and keep it to a minimum, but human error is with us. Carelessness is another thing. That's where we can be very preventative, and we can drop that number down significantly by being more careful. So we have 3 organizations at the federal level that we work with. FBI has a program called InfraGard, which is a public-private partnership we're a member of. We've been a member for about 20 years. And they used to send out a newsletter every 3 months, then every month, and then every day. And now they post updates to their website 5 or 6 a day on the threats that are out there. The president, since Reagan, every president has had an initiative around cybersecurity. An interesting story about Reagan, the first one who started cybersecurity at the federal level. He went out to Camp David for a weekend, and he watched a movie called War Games back in the early 80s. And it was about a young man who hacked into the North American radar system.
Good movie.
Yeah, and he came back to his national security briefing on Wednesdays. They had it, and it was he asked them, he started to talk about the plot of the movie, and they thought he was kind of off the rails because he's talking about some fictional movie. And at the end of it, he said, listen, I want you to tell me whether this is possible, and if so, what can we do about it? So the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, sir, we don't know, but we'll watch the movie, we'll go find out, and we'll come back and we'll tell you. Well, they came back 2 or 3 weeks later and they said, sir, not only is it possible, but the risk is far greater than we ever imagined. Mm-hmm. And that's when they started really paying attention to cybersecurity back in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. The Joint Chiefs of Staff every year gives a report to Congress of the 5 or 10 biggest threats that face the nation. And it's all the usual suspects: Iran, Soviet Union, North Korea, China, mostly around the nuclear threat, which is still there. But for the first time in 2016, they came back and said, cybersecurity is the biggest threat we have. We know how to protect against missiles, incoming missiles. We really don't know how to protect against this stuff at a grand level. And that is the biggest threat facing the nation right now. And they're adding people by the hundreds and building facilities underground to manage this massive amount of data that they have to sift through every day. So there's 5 important concepts around cybersecurity. Number one is backups, business continuity, and disaster recovery. You need to have a great backup, business continuity, and disaster recovery plan in place for your business, but also at home for your photos, your pictures, your documents, your banking information, your checkbook, all of that needs to be backed up. And you can use any number of inexpensive services like Mozy or Carbonite, or I use one called Crash Plan. It's about $50 a year. It's a backup system. And the important thing to understand is there's a difference between a backup system and a synchronization system. People say, I have iDrive from my iPhone, I can back all my photos up and whatever. Yeah, that's great until somebody hacks your iTunes password and toasts everything on all your devices. And that has happened many times. So what you want to do is you want to have a separate backup with a different username and password, so that if they got your username and password to anything, they're not going to be able to get into that. They're going to have to hack that password as well. So that's a very important concept. And that's the only way to protect really against a lot of these attacks, because they could steal your data, they can corrupt your data, they can sell your data, they can do all that, but the only way you're going to get it back is with a backup strategy. The other thing to understand is there's no privacy on the internet. It was determined by the Supreme Court back in the 70s that if you use a public network, at that time it was the phone system, every place you call, the length of that call is, and everybody who calls you is public information and can be discoverable. The content of a conversation needs a court order to look at, but anybody you call, anybody calls you, and the length of that call is certainly not, there's no privacy rights to any of that. And recently, the government, Congress, overwhelmingly approved the ability for not only the internet service providers to be able to see where you're going and browse where your browsing is, but they can sell that information to advertisers. And we'll talk about other people who do that on a regular basis. Everything.
Yeah, I think that's how it knows what you're constantly.
Oh, yeah.
I looked at lighting for a client 4 weeks ago, and then,
Bingo.
it knows exactly what you're doing.
And they're allowed to sell that information to advertisers about you. We'll talk about that. But Parliament, earlier this year, a lot of people complained about it, but they unanimously approved not only that your ISP and that these service providers, the phone company, your internet service provider, can track that information, they must track it for 2 years. So that if the government shows up and says, we want to know all of the texts of this person, all of the places he's visited, all the emails that he sent, that all must be handed over to the government. And if they don't have it, they're in trouble. They have to keep that for 2 years. Because they said that the public good of protecting against terrorism by getting this information overrides the individual's right to privacy. So this privacy discussion, I don't know which side you're on. It doesn't matter which side I'm on. I'm just saying that it's a big deal, and people have to understand that privacy is being eroded in a big way.
One more thing to thank terrorists for.
Yeah, exactly. Information about you and your firm is easily accessible. I can find out all kinds of things about the firm and the people in it. There's wizards on the dark web you can go on, put a person's name in or their email address. Yeah. It'll give you a complete network all about them, public records, where they live, their mortgages, how much they pay for the house, because this is all public information. My kids came home from school about 10 or 15 years ago when they were in junior high school, and they sat down at the dinner table and they told me all the places I lived, the cars I drove, the first name of my first wife, which I never shared with them. And I like, how did you ever get this? And they said, we just Googled you, Dad, and we kept following the path of breadcrumbs, you know? So understand that that's out there. Wow. And nothing is free in life or on the internet. So if you know anybody who's downloading first-run movies from a website, they're most likely on a site that's a den of thieves trying to steal information. And recently, it's been determined that if you actually download one of these movies and watch it, that's not against the law. It's against the law to actually post it, to go into a movie theater with a high-definition camera, take a picture of it, and then post it. That's illegal. But most of these sites are in Russia, Belarus, China, the Middle East, you know. So when you go on these sites, you're now walking into those zones. You have to understand that. And the other last thing is that we always have to be vigilant. We always have to be careful. This has to be front of mind every time we step up to a computer, because the bad guys only need to get lucky once. We have to be lucky every single time. So that's why the awareness is very important. So what does Apple, Google, Microsoft, AOL, Facebook, the internet service provider, and the government know about you? They know everything, okay? Google can guess your IQ within 5 points. If you use Gmail and Google search, they know your personal interests, your likes, your dislikes, the places you browse, your habits, when you access the internet, when you go to sleep at night, when you check your email. They know all of that about you. And they have a 19-point profile on every single one of us, and they don't share what that profile is or what those 19 points are, but they admit there's a 19-point profile. So if I access Google search and I put in Jaguars, and Alyssa put in Jaguars, and you put in Jaguars, if I was into sports, I'd get the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you were into cars, you would get all the Jaguar dealerships. If you were into animal rights, you would get all the zoos and animal rights groups around Jaguars. Of course, because it knows that that's typically what you do. I mean, if you use Gmail, you know that you send an email that I'm going to Colorado for 2 weeks, and suddenly here's Eastern Mountain Sports, and you want to go rafting. And
that's right.
That's how they get it. That's how they do it. It's robots. That's what they do. By the way, Outlook.com doesn't do that. Microsoft doesn't do that. So, but understand that stuff is out there, and we're leaving these breadcrumbs about us everywhere. So that brings us to the difference between Microsoft, Apple, and Google. Microsoft is a software company. Who uses Microsoft software here? I mean, we all do, right? It's the best business software on the planet. They make hardware now. They make the Xbox, and they make this device here I have, laptop. But primarily, their money is with software. Apple is a hardware company. I've got an iPhone. Apple made, if I paid $200 for that iPhone, Apple made $100. They make 100 to 200% profit on every single piece of equipment they sell. They don't sell operating systems like Microsoft. They don't sell software like Microsoft. They don't sell search like Google. What they do is they make a ton of money on the hardware, and then they've figured out a way of getting in the middle of the stream on that hardware and pulling off 20% of everything on there. So everything you buy on the Apple Store, they take 20% off the top. They grossed $27 billion on the iTunes Store, Apple Store last year, and they took 20% of it, over $5 billion, right off the top. Much bigger than many other technology companies. Just that one piece of their business. That's why they're so big. One of the reasons, anyway. Google is an ad agency, and you have to understand that. They give everything away for free, and then for that, you give them stuff. So in other words, we all think that the iPhone is probably the most, used device on the planet, but it isn't. The Android operating system on Android phones around the world has 85% of the market share around the world. Why? Because it's so cheap. They give away the operating system to Samsung and Nokia and all these companies, and they build that operating system in for free. If they went to Microsoft and Microsoft failed in that, they had to buy the software, the operating system from Microsoft, and Microsoft has gotten out of that business. Apple, you can't buy the Apple iOS on a Samsung device, so they're not selling that. Google gives it away, and they give it away because once you say, I agree to terms of service, you're now giving up a lot of information to them. They sell that information, they make billions and billions of dollars selling that to advertisers and marketers and manufacturing firms and whatever. They're also moving the needle in terms of privacy and a lot of the rights that we figure are just like the way it is. But tell you a story, you can go to Google Books right now and you can read just about any book for free with Google Books. They are scanning every single thing they can get their hands on, tens of thousands of books and periodicals every week. They got sued by the Writers Guild, and they lost. The Writers Guild lost, and because they wanted their copyrights. And the judge said that the greater good of them putting this out there and making it available to everybody overrides the writer's right to get royalties.
Wow.
That's insane.
And right now it's in appeals, which it will be probably for another year or two. But they've won many, many times over this.
Was that
So-
true, really? We can get free books on Google?
You can go and read them on Google Books. And the reason that one of the reasons that they won is because if you go to Google Books, there are no ads. They don't track what you're doing. They don't sell your information. So they don't benefit in any way, shape, or form from that particular website.
Why do they do?
What's that?
Why do they do it then?
Well,
Because they can.
who knows? Because in the future, who knows what they're going to do
What
with
we're
it.
going to
Yeah.
find out what's going
exactly.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of these companies like Uber. Anybody use Uber here? I use Uber a lot. Well, you got to watch these technology companies. Well, Google, to begin with, they have a lot of problems right now with their lawsuits and a lot of things that are going on internally there. But Uber got in trouble recently from Apple. Well, they're in trouble in a lot of ways. But if you watch the news, they're in deep trouble. And they don't make any money. They lose money constantly. But Uber was given a directive by Apple that if they don't update their software and stop doing what they're doing immediately, Apple would take them off of the Apple platform. So they would flip a switch one day and Uber would no longer work on your iPhone. And they said, if you don't do it within the next X number of days, we're taking you off of every single iPhone.
Wow.
And the debate around it was whether Apple should have that much power in the marketplace. But this is what Uber was doing. If you check the checkbox and say, I don't want you to track me when I'm not using the app, they continue to track you, okay? If you remove the app from your phone, they continue to track you.
What?
Yeah. Apple was pretty upset about it. And there was a backlash against Apple saying Apple has too much power in the marketplace. Because a lot of people don't really care whether they're being tracked or not. I
So
certainly
Apple
do.
tried to protect our privacy. Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I used a program called Waze, which is a great program, but it would constantly turn itself back on and track me when I'm not using the app.
Do the same thing.
Does the same thing, yeah. And that's how it's so effective, because everybody who's got the app reports up to the cloud, and you get all this big data as to what's going on up ahead. Yeah. So you give up a lot for free technology. With Google, what you give up for free Gmail and free search and all that is information about yourself. You also have to be aware that criminals make a lot of offers that are too good to be true. Free music, videos, free money. And if you know any senior citizens that use the internet, my mother uses iPad all the time. My sister and I are constantly checking what she's got on there, because they prey on senior citizens. My wife's stepfather passed away. They went to clean up his stuff, and they found out that he had given probably $8,000 to people who said, you've won the Jamaican lottery, give us $500, $1,000, and we'll send you your $3 million, And well, there is no Jamaican lottery to begin with, and they prey on senior citizens that way. So be careful and make sure you talk to people about this. The criminals are working all the time. They have robots, and you have to be paranoid to the point of vigilant to the point of paranoid. And it's not just me saying this. Andy Grove, who was a co-founder and CEO of Intel, that was the name of his memoirs back in the 90s. Only the Paranoid Survived. Now, of course, he was a Russian emigre, so he lived under a system where paranoia was the name of the game. And you have to understand that everyone and every company is under attack. There used to be two ways of thinking about this, two kinds of companies, those that know they're under attack and those that don't know they're under attack. But that's the old way of thinking. The new way of thinking of those that have been breached and those that will be breached, okay? Because it's going to happen. More than half of us have had our information stolen already. That's not by me. The FBI and Lowell McAdam has said that. He was a Verizon CEO when asked about the Yahoo purchase on CNBC. I'll never forget it, 6:30 one morning. They said, well, why would you buy a company like Yahoo? They've been breached and hacked several times. And he said, listen, we all live on the internet. We all understand. And if you don't understand that if you haven't been breached, at some point you will, and you better be prepared for it, then you're not living in reality. And a month ago, when the new FBI director took over and he got in front of Congress and they asked him about this issue, he said, on a national scale, there's nations that know they're going to get breached or already have been breached, and there is still like in the dark about a lot of this and need to be educated. So that's the kind of thinking that you have to think about this in, that, you know, they're out there looking to get you, and you have to be very, very careful. So what do? These are self-morphing viruses they came up with in 2007. That was where a virus gets on your computer, and as soon as it gets detected, it changes its shape, form, signature, moves to a different part of the computer. My daughter had this on her computer. I walked in her room, hard drive was spinning. I said, why is the hard drive spinning? We're not touching the computer. Turned on the monitor, found a virus, cleaned the virus, found the virus, cleaned the virus, found the virus, cleaned the virus. That went on for a day before the antivirus people figured out how to kill that virus. But those are out there right now. And you can buy your very own virus on the internet for $100. You could take an existing virus, they'll morph it into a shape and run it against every virus engine until it comes up clean on all of them, because it doesn't recognize it yet as a virus. And that's what's called a zero-day threat. Nobody knows about it in the world except you, that this is a virus. And you can distribute that, and you can have 10 antivirus programs on your computer. They would not recognize it as a virus. 2009, a Russian team came up with this. We know who the gang leader is. We know where he lives. We know where he eats. We know where he shops. You just can't touch him because he's in Russia. He came out with what's called a man-in-the-browser attack. So when you went to a banking site, it recognized you were at a banking site, and it immediately stole your username and password and sent it out to the hackers. It was incredibly effective. And no antivirus could find it because it was so small and so tiny. You could actually configure this to only look for certain banks, so it would be even smaller and more stealth. We saw a 300% increase in those kinds of attacks 2 years later. Why? Because he sold it for 2 years and made a lot of money on it to other hackers for a lot of money. And in 2011, he figured he made enough money and he gave it away for free on the internet. So everybody started using this Zeus virus. 2013, they started attacking different parts of the computer. So RAM is the part on the memory on your computer where when you open up a Word document, it's sort of like your desktop. You have everything up there and you're working on it. And then you go to file it away, you put it in a file cabinet, you save it on your hard disk. What they did was, at Target, they found a hole in the firewall, which was opened up by the people who were managing their HVAC systems remotely. So they used that hole to get in. They then jumped on all of the cash registers throughout Target that had the exact same username and password, okay, which they hacked. When they swiped the credit card at the terminal, all those numbers went into the RAM memory of the computer. They get encrypted and then sent out. Well, as soon as they hit the RAM memory, they sent it 18 million times out to the hackers, and that's how they got 18 million credit card numbers, including mine. Target had to notify everybody who used the credit card. I got notified. There you go. Hundreds of millions of dollars it cost them. Not to mention PR and all the publicity, bad publicity. And by the way, they teach computer science students. First year college, they taught my son this 3 years ago, how to write those programs. It's very easy to write. This is not like rocket science. You can learn how to do it on the internet. And not only do they attack Windows machines, you can attack Linux machines, Apple machines, whatever. You can grab all the keyboard strokes, you can grab everything and send it out. 2014, there was an SSL vulnerability, which SSL encrypts data between two locations so that if you're looking at it as it goes by on the internet, it just looks like gibberish. Well, they figured out how to hack that. And then we had the Sony hack. If you remember, they exposed all of those emails for the Sony executives and the actresses and actors and everything several years ago. Well, they shut down Sony for about a week and a half. No email, nothing. And they were in their systems for about 6 months to a year, they figured. And they were stealing all this information. And as soon as they got detected, they blew up all their servers, shut down their email, and then exposed everything on the internet. Anybody know who did that? It was the North Koreans. And we know that for a fact. It's public knowledge. And the reason he did it, the dictator there, is because they released a movie about him, that comedy movie.
Yeah. Right.
He didn't like the movie, and he says, all right, we'll blow this up. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. 2015, there was a massive attack at the Office of Personnel Management. 23 million Americans had all of their personal information stolen at this federal agent, all federal offices. Not just people who work there, anybody who applied for a job there. When you fill out your driver's license, your social security number, background check information, 23 million Americans had their information stolen that way. Anybody know who did that? Chinese. We know it was the Chinese, yeah. 2016, we found out about the Ukrainian power grid hack in 2015, and 3 days before Christmas, a group of Russians shut down power to 750,000 Ukrainians. And they were in their systems for 6 months. They blew them up. It took them like almost a week and a half to get everything back in order and get people power again. And it could have been worse, except that the Ukrainian power grid is not computer controlled to a large degree, like ours is. Because if it was, they could have taken out probably power for millions of Ukrainians. And they took credit for it. The Russian group took credit for it because they wanted the Ukrainian people to know that the people who were running their country were a bunch of, incompetent fools. And they wanted them to know that they need Mother Russia on their side. And they also wanted the world to know, because we figured out how they did it. They wanted the world to know how advanced they were in cyber crime techniques. And it was an incredibly sophisticated, large hack. Then this year, we saw the Podesta hacks, the DNC, Yahoo got hacked, Swift got hacked, LinkedIn. Podesta, that hack where they stole all his emails, 10,000 emails or so, Clinton's right-hand man. 14-year-old could have done that. They sent him an email on a Saturday night, late, and it looked like a Google email, and it said, came from Google supposedly, and it said, your password has been hacked. You should click here and change your Google password. He sent it to his IT guy, which is what he should have done. And the IT guy said, this is a legitimate email, change your password. So he clicked on the link. He went to a website in the province of New Zealand owned by a bunch of Ukrainians. They immediately had his current password and what he wanted it to be. They went directly to Google. They changed it at Google. He was none the wiser because his stuff still worked. They changed his password for him. They knew what it was. They stole all 10,000 emails and sent them to WikiLeaks.
Oh my God.
They interviewed the IT guy, and he said, well, I made a big mistake. I meant to say this is not a legitimate hack.
Oh my gosh.
But we'll talk about ways that you can prevent that from happening for you. The SWIFT hack was another interesting one. You probably never heard of that. SWIFT is a banking system whereby large government banks do business around the world. It's electronic transfer of funds. And it's supposed to be highly secured. Well, the Bank of Bangladesh thought it was a good idea to buy secondhand used routers, which had their firmware hacked. So it had a backdoor for the hackers. You plug it into the internet, and they immediately lights up on their screen, and they're in that router looking at all the traffic going by. They spent about 3 or 4 months learning all of the codes, okay? And one morning, they started funneling money out of the Federal Reserve Bank account for the Bank of Bangladesh to multiple individual accounts in the Philippines, which immediately got flushed out to Chinese banks. $75 million in about an hour and a half.
Oh
And the only reason it was stopped was that, again, somebody was vigilant and aware at the Federal Reserve and said, we've never seen this much money go from Bangladesh to the Philippines. They didn't know it was going to China at the time, but $75 million in an hour and a half? That's crazy. Click, and they shut it off until they could figure out what was going on. Had he not done that, another 2 or 3 hours, then it could have been $1 billion out of the Bank of Bangladesh. Yeah.
So how do they can they get that back? Or is it just
No,
gone?
it's gone.
It's just gone.
It's gone. It's totally gone.
$75 million.
Gone. Because China doesn't cooperate with us. And we'll talk about China and what they do and the different actors in the world, yeah. So why do these people do it? For most of them, it's the same answer Willie Sutton and John Dillinger gave 100 years ago. They were asked, why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is, you know. Why else would they rob banks? And you wouldn't want to go into a bank now when you can sit behind your computer in a foreign country and steal even more money. So who are these perpetrators? There's 5 distinct groups. You have insiders, people who, you know, go rogue internally, and they're pretty dangerous, and they can do damage to a single company. And I can tell you this, we work with some of the largest multinationals in the world, Exxon, AT&T, and there are people, organizations who actually get hired by them for the specific purpose of inside hacking and stealing information. And they come across like they're completely clean. We had a healthcare institution I was working with, and it scares me, some of the things that they tell me. They said, you know, we had a couple people who started working for us, and then all of a sudden, they never showed up for work one day, and they were gone. No forwarding address, nothing works anymore. Their address doesn't work. They disappeared. Now, these people had privy and access to hundreds, if not thousands, of healthcare records. And, you know, even if you have all the controls in place, it's very hard to protect against, because what they're doing now, I have a friend who runs a help desk for hospitals across the world. He's got about 1,000 employees in 4 data centers call centers around the world. His employees, when they show up, have to check their cell phones and everything at the door. He's got cameras on all of them. And because, you know, they could be on a computer in a Los Angeles medical facility, George Clooney shows up, and there's his patient record as they're trying to help whoever it is fix their problem. And they can take their phone out, click it, and tweet it out to the world. And people have done that. So these insiders are pretty dangerous, and they're very hard to protect against. You have individuals and lone wolves. Those two are very, very dangerous, but it's limited what they can do. They usually have a vendetta or agenda against an individual or an organization. Now we're getting into the more dangerous ones, these hacktivists. These people don't do it for money for the most part. They do it for political and social reasons. They actually believe in these causes, like WikiLeaks and people like that. They actually have some groups who believe that all data in the entire world should be public information. So what's in my 401k account, what you have in your checkbook, all of that should be known to the world, the whole world. And their goal, and they've stated on their website, is to liberate data. That's their goal. These people are wacko, but they're out there and they're smart. They also have political agendas and social agendas. The political agenda, the Estonia hack was pretty interesting. Estonia is a very small country. They do everything on the internet, from dog licenses to voting to everything. Because it's small, they can do that. They decided they were going to pick up the graves of some Russian soldiers and move them to a memorial park outside of town. A group of Russians got together and said this is going to be an affront to their memory. They organized 30,000 computers, and they shut that country down for a week. They had to convene the greatest security experts in the world to go there and figure out how they do it, get it back in shape. And they actually figured out who did it, and they put those people in jail. But they had a political agenda that you know, Estonia was doing something they didn't like. These are pretty dangerous people with big, big pockets, the state-sponsored terrorists. China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran are the biggest, obviously. And this is actually a wanted poster by the FBI. We know who these people are. Again, we know where they have dinner. We know where they work. We can't touch them because they're in China. And we know exactly what they did. They hacked into, U.S. government property, American private property, all these things. And then you have the well-organized criminal networks. This is sort of like an eye chart, but it is a real network, criminal network. So when you get hacked, it's usually not one group. There's a group that writes the virus. There's a group that distributes the virus. There's a group that will then buy the virus, go after somebody, grab their information. Once they get the information, they have subscribers they sell it to. And then from there, they have other people, the subscribers then hire other people to go out and pull the money out of the accounts. And then you have the people who are laundering the money. It's a huge value chain where everybody gets a piece of the action. And also at the front end of it are organizations that will sell information. So for instance, we had a client that got hit by the Zeus virus. They didn't lose any money, but a hacker group identified them as a high value target because they manage 75 restaurants in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. You've eaten at the restaurants, I'm sure. All of that's managed in an office about the size of your office. All the payables and receivables come from one investment group that owns these restaurants. So you can imagine how much money flows through that computer system. They did research, they bought research on the fact that this is a high value target, everything about the owners, everything about the people who work there, who does the financing there. There's another group that then bought that and then befriended them on social media and whatever. Said, we're in the same industry as you, talk the same language, via email, maybe I'll meet you at this industry event, blah, 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 blah. Sent them a little thing, that Zeus virus, in an email, put it on their computer. As soon as they went to one of the 5 banks within a 5-mile radius, because they're not going to bank at a bank 20 miles away, fires up on, it sends the credentials to the hacker, puts a message up on the screen saying the banking website is down now because they have sites that look just like the banking website. You know, come back later. They then sold that to 2,000 people around the world. TD Bank called them and said, are you trying to transfer $30,000? And they said, no. And they said, all right, we'll call you back. They called back in about 45 minutes and they said, we've frozen all of your accounts. They said, we saw 1 attempt, 2 attempts, we saw 1,900 attempts within 45 minutes to transfer money out of your account. This is the well-organized criminal network.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. So who are the targets? Everybody's a target. 90% of all attacks are against businesses with less than 1,000 employees. Wow. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
A third of all breaches are companies with less than 100 employees, just like us, okay? Retailers are usually attacked the most, more than the previous target, the financial institutions. That's because so much is done electronically. But small businesses are the biggest targets out there because there's so many of them, and so many of them don't pay attention or have the budget. And retailers don't have the budget. Retailers work typically on a 1 to 2 to 3% margin on everything they sell. It's all about volume. And they don't have a whole lot of money for cybersecurity. So that's another reason why they're attacked a lot. So what do? They use viruses, spyware, malware, hundreds of attempts foiled every week. It's all designed to steal information. And there's multiple ways that they can get in. They can get in emails, texts, and websites. 90%, if you look at your inbox, for every email that hits your inbox, 50 of them are thrown away at the front door. 98% of email is spam. So imagine sifting through 50 emails to find that one email you had if you didn't have a good spam filter. And that's very easy to create. I can create an email right now, looks like it came from her, and send it to you. Very easy.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's easy to spoof somebody's address and impersonate someone else.
I got a fake.
And if you don't know how to do it, Google it. They'll teach you on the internet.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we caught one in our spam filter that said it was from Bill Scott, which is so bizarre because so Bill works for the company that we share office space with. I don't think I've ever emailed him, ever.
Yeah, but they know that you're
But
here
they
in the
know
same.
that we work in the same building.
Oh
and
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Insane.
Oh yeah.
That's insane.
Oh yeah.
Different kind of. So
They also they'll send you viruses in email and they'll send you viruses in text. You can click on a text and get a virus on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And the most advanced ones, which are very expensive viruses at this point, of course, that all comes down over time. In the future, you can click on the text and your phone could be toasted pretty easily. But to do that now, it's possible, but it's very expensive to buy that software. And then you have links to infected websites. What do you mean an infected website? Okay? These are drive-by infections. So 1 in 8 web pages are infected, and that's a Google statistic. And 9,500 a day come on infected. That's what Google says. And what that means is, this is how ransomware works. Your browser is nothing more than like your Word document, okay? The website has a series of instructions, just like the Word document has a series of instructions to put the words here, pictures there, format it like this. That's exactly what the website has. It's got a series of programming instructions to your web browser to put, videos over here, a banner over there, wording here, click boxes there, and all that. And if you embed a virus within those instructions to your browser, the browser could very easily do some very nasty things. And they do. And that's why your browser, you should do your updates on a regular basis for your browsers, your desktops, everything. And this is how ransomware works. You go and you click on a website. Well, it came in through your firewall, so it just looks like a website. It shows up in an email as just a link, and you click on it, and it takes you to one of these sites that puts the ransomware on there. And what does the ransomware do? It goes and starts changing files and encrypting them so you can't read them, corrupting them. And then they demand that you pay them money, and they'll give you the key to unlock it again. That's how ransomware works. And the antivirus doesn't know it, because this could be a 0-day virus that I talked about, so your antivirus doesn't know it. And even if it suspects that it is, it's just changing files, which is what you do all day long. So it's very, very difficult. The only way you can prevent it is never click on a link unless you're absolutely sure it's safe. I mean, I've almost done this, I can't tell you how many times in the past year, and I stopped myself. And then I moused over the link to see really where it was, and I realized this was not coming from where I thought it was coming from. So if you mouse over it, you can see it, but now they make these tiny URLs, which are just like you can go to Google. If you have a URL that's really long, you go to Google, you put it in Google and say, oh no, it converts it to this little tiny thing, and mousing over it won't help then. You also have to be sure that you look for the name right before the .com, the .org, or whatever, once it's up there on the screen, because you want to make sure you're going to bankofamerica.com, not bankofamerica.hackers.com, okay? And that's usually bolded in most browsers. And the Podesta thing, if requested to change your password, don't click on the link. Delete the email, open up your browser, log into the site manually, type google.com. Had Podesta done that, those 10,000 emails would be a non-issue.
Wow.
And also confirm the identity of anybody that sends you a link or attachment. We had somebody who was spoofed the owner's email address. She was about ready to do a $10,000 wire transfer. She was actually emailing the hacker back and forth because he registered a domain name 1 character different than theirs with the owner's name. So she thought she was talking to him. She's talking to the hacker. Well, which account do you want me to put this in? And she was all ready to send to give him the password, and she picked up the phone and called Jack and said, Jack, are you trying to, it's like, what are you talking about? And that was it.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's being aware and just kind of stopping and thinking. So the economics of all this stuff is pretty interesting. As I said, the crime gangs build them for their own use, like the Zeus virus. They sell them and then they give them away, like the Zeus virus. Nation states build them for spying on other nation states, gathering intel on other nation states and their citizens, and then for stealing stuff, okay? Venture capital firms build these. So in other words, you have a venture capital firm that invests in a firm primarily in the Middle East, because Israel is the best at all this, and several other countries there. They have the best engineers for this stuff. So they build these tools that will go in and hack systems, hack the iPhone, hack all kinds of things, create viruses that you can send in text that will go into the phone and give the hacker all the information on the phone. These are big, big profit things because the only thing people who can afford them are nation states. I mean, millions and millions of dollars they pay for this stuff. Their clients are nation states, and they use them for spying and theft. And the U.S. government agencies do this as well. Absolutely, they do it. And companies that are headquartered here create these things and sell them to nation states and whatever. There's a big business around that. So I saw General Michael Hayden, who was a former head of the NSA and CIA. He's making the rounds now because he's in private practice, so he shows up on CNBC and CNN pretty regularly these days. I saw his presentation on this about 9 months ago, and I was kind of happy because our presentations were 80% identical.
Oh, great.
So I stole the other 20% from him, and I included it here. So he said some interesting things, though. He said spy versus spy has been going on forever. He said, we do it, and we're the best at it with the best tools, and may that continue. You see, we do it for fundamentally different reasons than our adversaries, China, Iran, Soviet Union, North Korea. He said, we do it to spread our values, democracy, freedom, and all that, and they do it. He said, well, Russia does it because they want to take over the world again, which is pretty obvious. China does it to steal money. They don't care. They have more people than they need. They have a bigger economy than you can imagine, but they just want to continue to steal money. They have all the power in many other ways, and they just want money. North Korea, well, that's a different story. He also said cyber warfare is more difficult than conventional warfare, and we don't even know how to defend against it. We know how to defend against missiles coming in, but this stuff we don't know how to defend against. And he said there's honorable hacks, like when the Chinese hacked the Office of Personnel Management and stole 23 million Americans' information. He said, we consider that an honorable hack in the cybersecurity community because we should have never let them in there to do that in the first place. They didn't destroy anything. They stole stuff, and we allowed them to steal it because we were not good enough. He said, and by the way, I'd be a hypocrite if I said it was an honorable hack. He said, because if my guys came in and told me that they can take 23 million Chinese citizens' information who work for the government, he said, wrap it up, tie it up in a bow, and put it on my desk. He said, I would have done the exact same thing, given the opportunity. He said, that was an honorable hack. The North Korean act, that, he said, was very dangerous. It was the first time a nation state attacked American private property and destroyed it. He said, I consider that, and many of us in the security community consider it an act of war. And had they come over here and blown up some of these buildings, we would have gone after him wherever he had.
And no questions asked.
And the same thing happened, cost just as much money, billions of dollars, and his fingerprints were all over it. And we should have given him everything we had. He said Obama at that time should have done something. And he's pretty nonpartisan, if you ever watch him, yeah. So the future of cybersecurity techniques, we have these zero-day threats, password hacking, they're a problem. And the viruses and the antivirus and the firewalls are useless against them. So a little bit of information now on what the future holds. SIEM, which is Security Information and Event Management. And what that is, and you're familiar with this, if you ever got a call from your credit card company that, are you really using your credit card here or you can't use it here?
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to all of us.
California.
Yeah, it's big data. They have information, just like Google has a profile on you. They know your habits. They knew that I never went to North Carolina before and bought gas and went out to dinner when I took my daughter down to college. Mm-hmm. So they disallowed me to buy that dinner until I called them because they knew that's way out of the bounds of what I do. Mm-hmm. That technology is very expensive, very powerful, but very expensive. And that's coming down in price to the small and medium market. And what I mean by that is, if we could get information on how each and every one of you behaves on your computer, how many files you change on a regular basis, what time you log in, when you check your email, all that, we can create a profile and we can look at every single one of those events and see if that event falls into a pattern that is familiar or it falls outside of a pattern. So that in the future, we'll know that, let's say, you don't check your email at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, maybe you do, but I don't. And it may occasionally, but if suddenly you log in, you have 5 bad login attempts, suddenly you're in your email, and suddenly you're sending emails to another Gmail account, okay, out of your business account. That's going to create an alarm that says that doesn't sound right. So these behavioral analytics using big data is what we're going to be seeing in the future. And that's the only way that we're going to really protect against some of these things. So social networking sites, it's pretty obvious. Everything you put out there is available to the world. Once it's on the internet, it never goes away. People say, well, it's really not hackable. Listen, Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook account was hacked for about 6 hours and exposed to the world, okay? So if Mark Zuckerberg's account can get hacked, I think they can hack mine. And once it's on the internet, it never goes away. People say, well, you know, Snapchat, it gets destroyed. No, it doesn't get destroyed because, think about it, you can take a picture on your phone of your screen. You can take a picture of your phone with another phone. I mean, and then publish that. I mean, it just never goes away. So be careful what you post. Don't be stupid. Don't be posting things like, we're going on vacation for 2 weeks. We're not going to be home. People troll those sites. Criminal gangs troll those sites, and they sell that information. Smartphone apps, be very careful of these, like Waze. That's why I got rid of Waze. 50% of it take your personal information, and sometimes against your wishes and will and everything. You should delete the ones you don't use right now, today. Go through them and get rid of them. I like trying new apps out and whatever, and I find I don't use many of them, and I get rid of them when I don't need them because I don't know what they're doing in the background. And before you get rid of your phone, make sure you wipe it. There's a very simple process on every phone. Do you want to wipe this phone? Yes. Are you absolutely sure? Yes. Are you absolutely positively sure that everything here is going to be gone forever? Click yes. And then it is gone forever. Except for the NSA and CIA, they have techniques that can get it back. The location services, the good and bad about those is that, you know, they can turn on location services anytime they want, and they can find out where you are.
The
now,
government or like other people?
Other apps. Well, that's what Waze does. It turns its location services on and knows where I am. Yeah. Wow. And I don't mind, you know, when I turn on my Starbucks app and I'm on the corner of 14th and 8th and I'm looking for a Starbucks, that's, you know, that's value for value. You know, they can sell the information that I'm there. I don't care, you know. But when Waze tracks my movement all the time, when I'm not even using the app and I told them not to, that's kind of creepy. Yes. They can also turn on your microphone and camera.
Yep, we were talking about that.
We were just talking about that.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Well, of course. Your banking app, how do you think it takes a picture of your check? I mean, it turns on your camera. You can turn on your microphone just as easily on these apps. And people say, well, the App Store is secure and Google is secure. No, it's not. 500,000 downloads of a Chinese hacker's app over a week period of time at the Apple Store happened, and it was stealing information and turning things on and doing things on 500,000 phones. Google, about a month and a half ago, did a sweep of all of the apps at the Google Play, and they got rid of 10,000 apps that were doing these kinds of things. So be very careful. Wireless networks, another very, very easy place to hack if you don't handle it right. If it doesn't require a password, and most networks now, like Starbucks and a lot of these networks don't require a password, it's open and it's less secure. So when you're on those sites, you want to make sure you only access the HTTPS sites, S standing for secure, when you're on an open Wi-Fi, because that means that it's encrypted from your device through that wireless network to this other place. And most sites now, if you go to Google, if you notice, most sites immediately set it to HTTPS because it's encrypted then.
So
at home?
I have a question about that.
Sure.
So, like, I can't imagine ever doing like banking stuff at a Starbucks because that would just scare the crap out of me.
Yep.
But like if you were.
But you see, if you go to the banking site, it's encrypted across that open connection, so it's all gibberish there.
Okay. So like if you're at Starbucks and you're on like Home Depot's website, right? You're looking for tile for your client. If you don't buy anything, like you don't put a credit card number in, is it still, like, can you still be hacked? I don't understand how that works. Like if you're just browsing on a non-secure site but you don't necessarily do anything.
Well, whoever is managing that wireless network, as I said before, they have access to where you're going, so they know you're going to Home Depot.
Got it. Okay, so they can still track you.
Yep.
Okay.
They can still track you, and Home Depot will track you.
Well, that
for marketing purposes or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
And at home, always protect your network with a password. That's goes without saying. And I usually don't even use the free ones. Like every time I show up anywhere, I plug in my own little hotspot, which is more secure. Be very careful with thumb drives. And I'm going to try and wrap this up in the next 5 or 10 minutes. Be very careful about thumb drives because it's easy to embed one of those with a virus. As soon as you plug it into a computer, the virus gets exposed, and you wouldn't even know it's a virus, a 0-day virus again, and the hacker is now on your computer.
Never knew that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The same thing with the externals, too.
External hard drive?
Yeah.
No.
No.
No. Well, you can put a virus on an external hard drive. It's a little harder, but the Iranian nuclear program was put back 2 to 3 years by us and the Israelis. We had an operative inside their nuclear facility where they spin up the uranium in these centrifuges, and we had somebody put a USB key in it, crawled the network, found a controller for the centrifuges, got into the Microsoft SQL database with the default username and password, changed all the values in the middle of the night, spun those centrifuges up so fast, they came in the morning, they were exploded, and they lost about 60% of their enriched uranium.
What a nonviolent way to take care of that. I respect that very much.
Yeah, that put them back 2 to 3 years, and and they had to expose how we did it. It's called the Stuxnet virus. And the only reason they had to expose and let the world know is because now this virus got out into the wild, and they were afraid that people with those same Siemens controllers didn't change their username and password, so it was a warning to them, you better change your username and password. Getting back to the most important thing, usernames and passwords. So with thumb drives, make sure you only use brand names. Never use one you found on the street or given to you or whatever.
Don't use one I just find in the bottom of my drawer.
Not a good idea. That's a little probably more secure unless somebody who left it there is really out to get you. But no, they sprinkle them around like Starbucks.
Well, how about the ones you get at like trade shows and things like that?
Don't use them.
Don't use
They're made in China. Yeah, we stopped giving them away and using them. I get anything on that, I throw it away because anything on there you can get on the web anyway. Anything that's on there is on the internet. Yeah.
I know. I got a few of those right at home right now.
Well, most of them are made in China. And it's very easy to embed a virus in there. And we found manufacturing, Cisco, U.S. manufacturer, makes incredible technology. Before the government installs any Cisco product, they de-engineer it, they pull it all apart, they look at every single chip, and they confirm that those chips are the right ones and they're doing what they should be doing, because they found even in Cisco branded gear and HP branded gear that was made overseas, they would embed a chip in there and then they could get in just like they did with the Bank of Bangladesh and look at everything that's going on there. Oh yeah.
Is that state funded hacking, or is that like some jerk in the factories like, I'm gonna stick my chip in
the
there?
State, that's expensive stuff to do. The state is definitely behind it. India, it was a huge plus for Cisco. There's a company called Huawei. I don't know if you ever heard of them. Never did. Probably the largest electronics firm in the world. Chinese government owned. They make switches, routers, everything electronic. Huawei. 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 They have an office right over here next to the mall in the office park over there. Their U.S. office is in Texas. They came into Somerset County about 10 years ago, and they sent a whole entourage of people to talk to us at the business partnership about business and capitalism and all this stuff. They were looking for a lot of information, and they dumped a lot of money around the country into PR, and at the same time, they were proposing to get together with a company called U.S. Cellular, big red, white, and blue logo, and create a third or fourth wireless network, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, and Huawei was going to partner with U.S. Cellular to build this network and lower the price of cell phone calls and wireless access and everything. And some very smart people in Washington said, no, we're not going to let you do that, because they have a history of doing these kinds of things. And had they built this network, you would have had millions of Americans that they would have had access to all their phones and all their wires. In India, they sell telecom equipment, and they hacked into so many people's stuff that and caused so much damage and stole so much money and everything that the Indian government tried to go after them and never could because they're in China. It's a Huawei company. So what they had to do, the Indian government had to do, was put in a rule that says if you're a telecom company and you install a Huawei product or any product, and that product is used to hack into systems, you are responsible, not the manufacturer. We're coming after you. And that immediately, they were popping champagne bottles at Cisco because now they were buying all Cisco equipment rather than Huawei. So you want to make sure your antivirus is up to date and configured to scan anything plugged into your computer. So if your antivirus recognizes that as a virus getting plugged in, at least that's one. But then again, you have the zero-day viruses. And
what's the best antivirus product?
all the top 10 are one as good as the other. Trend Micro, ESET, Symantec, AVG. We use something now called WebRoot. We like that the best.
WebRoot?
WebRoot. WebRoot. That's
Trend Micro.
Trend Micro, yeah. WebRoot is a new style of antivirus. It's antivirus 2.0, they call it. It's much more effective. So we recommend WebRoot. But if you have the other ones, you're okay. So many companies are doing to protect themselves. If you get a computer from PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the accounting firm, it doesn't have a USB drive. It doesn't have a thumb drive. It doesn't have any of that stuff.
How do you plug your mouse into it?
They're wireless mice and here. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is the most important thing. I'm going to try and wrap up in 5 minutes. Social engineering. It's the latest and most effective tool, getting people to do stuff they shouldn't do, okay? You get a call, I'm from the help desk, I'm from Microsoft, I'm from the IRS, I'm from your bank. Hang up, you know? I mean, especially if Microsoft calls, conference me in because I can't get them on the phone. and we're a silver Microsoft partner, so.
That's how I felt about the IRS.
Yeah.
They called me and I was like, nuh-uh, because when I want to talk to you,
No.
hold for an hour and a half.
Right.
Not
But
the IRS.
this works a million times. I mean, we've had clients call up and say, listen, somebody just called and said they were from your firm and I gave them access to my computer.
Oh, no.
I'm like, whoa, stop. What? Yeah,
Should have
no.
called first.
Yeah. And just confirm who you're talking to. And don't listen to any market research firms. They'll call up, they'll try and gather information, they'll send you a Starbucks card, forget it. Okay?
Just hang up, right?
Yep, and in terms of trusting people, and this is how Edward Snowden did it. Everybody knows who Edward Snowden is. It doesn't matter whether I think he's a hero, you think he's a hero, or a thief, or whatever. This is how he did it. He was a low-level desktop support guy. He changed toners, he fixed mice, he did things like that. 6 years he worked at the NSA. Originally contracted in by Dell, and then Dell lost the contract, and they requested the new people keep this guy on board. So he got hired by the company who took over the outsourcing contract. And because they liked him. They knew him, they liked him. He probably helped them with their home computers and their kids' computers. He was a nice guy. He was a nice guy. And one day, he walked up to 3 people with the highest level security clearance there, who he knew personally, and they trusted him. He said, listen, I see you got a problem with your computer, but I don't want to go against protocol. I don't want to log in. I don't want to know your password. You log in, I'll get on your computer, and I'll fix it. So they said, oh, yeah, sure, Ed. Boom. They log in. He gets on the computer. He sticks a keylogger on there and logs out. The next time they logged in, he had their username and password on his phone. He then, within 3 or 4 hours, stole everything under their credentials.
In 4 hours?
In 3 or 4 hours, yeah. Downloaded everything, and he was gone. If you remember, he was gone. Gone. In the wind. He was in China before we knew it.
Yep.
And
before
then
we even knew what happened, it was just gone.
That other bastion of freedom and privacy and goodwill, the Soviet Union. That's where he is now. So that's how he did it. And the reason we found out was months later, after they figured it out, they sent an email to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and CC'd those 3 people and said, this is how he did it. And these people should be fired if they don't resign immediately. And they all 3 resigned immediately. So we lost 3 very high-level, seasoned, probably very smart security people.
For something that like anybody would have fallen for.
Exactly.
Well, not you.
Well, they did.
We would have.
They did it. I could have. Who knows? I mean, he they did it because they had to set a standard in a lesson. That they did violate protocol to let him on their computer with his low security clearance.
Wow.
He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that keyboard at all. Yeah. And by the way, you won't see that in the Oliver Stone movie.
Yeah,
he doesn't talk too much about that. Because he thinks he's a hero. I have a slightly different opinion of him.
What's a keylogger?
A keylogger is very easy to put on a computer, and it logs every single keystroke that you do.
It's something he put into there, or it's an actual piece of it?
No, it was he had probably embedded it on the network, went on their computer, downloaded it off the network, and poof. Or he might have slipped in a key. Who knows? I'm not sure.
But it can be either thing.
Either thing, yeah, easy. It's a program. You run a program, it goes blip, it's in there. You don't even know it's there. It's so small it doesn't even show up on anything. Typing away.
Someone tracking what you're
Every
doing.
keystroke goes out. You can put an antenna across the street on this window, and as I'm typing, you can pick up every keystroke.
We did talk about that.
Yeah.
Invisibility.
That's why the most secure places are lead encased and all that. Beware of wire transfers. I don't know if you do any here, but if you do, if you know anybody that does, make sure that they are absolutely double, triple confirm who they're talking to. Yeah. Well, I have some theories about that too.
I know you do, but I just feel better using my checkbook.
Well, that's an interesting question. People say, well, I'm never going to use online banking. I'm never going to pay bills online. I'd rather write out a check with the routing number, my signature, the account number, put it in this very secure envelope, and stick it on the public street over here.
That's what I do.
So anybody walking down the street can just go click. And not only that, but they've got my Macy's account number.
That is true.
Well, now they actually block out all the account numbers. If you notice, they stop
Just
putting
the
the complete, the last
four.
3 or 4, exactly.
But once you get it to the bank, it's going into an electronic system anyway, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
I just don't want it. I've had a challenge with someone who has the same name as me, and she's still on my credit report. And I think I was traveling like years ago in Detroit for work, and I think she got my credit card.
Yep.
And I still have trouble.
Oh yeah, I mean,
so I do as little as possible.
Yeah, that's a shame because it's trying to shake yourself loose of that is like almost impossible.
Writing letters and lawyers and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and once the data gets corrupted out there on you, forget it. They had me married to my mother 25 years ago, and a judgment against me in Ohio. Back then, I used to write credit bureau software, and I used my account every once in a while to test it. And and it took me years to get it off of there. Years. So what can we do? We can lock the doors, which is good. You have your door locked. That's a beautiful thing. We do too. Some places they well, not this door, right? But some places can't, like hospitals, healthcare center, public places. Very hard to lock doors in those places. That's why criminals prey on those places. You can lock your computer whenever you leave your computer. Control-Alt-Delete locks the computer because not this environment. This is fairly trustworthy and whatever. But I tell this to a lot of companies where there's people coming and going all day long. Very easy just to see something on the screen and take a picture of it. Could be the insiders, yeah. At the end of the day, you need to log off of your computer. If you're not doing that, log off every single day. Don't shut it down because that's how you get your updates in the middle of the night, but log off. Don't leave a password written next to the computer. I'm amazed I still have to say this. I walked into a new client and the accounting person had ADP and this bank and that bank on sticky notes all over her monitor.
In war games, that's how he gets it. It's written underneath the desk. There's a post-it.
Yeah, underneath the keyboard or whatever, USB drives and flash drives, and be very careful with them. Notebook computers, if you've got a lot of confidential data on them, you should have encryption, and financial institutions and financial companies absolutely have to encrypt everything on their laptops.
What's the best manufacturer for a laptop?
It all depends on what you like. They're all about the same. I like this.
Yours is pretty.
I like this. It's a
Surface.
This is a Surface Book. It's about a year old. The new ones are about the same. But it all depends on what you like. My wife hates this computer. I just got her a Dell. It looks almost the same as this, but she likes the keyboard better. It's really personal taste when you get down to these laptops. The other thing you can do logically is change your password regularly, and that's very easy to do. Control-Alt-Delete, change passwords, and you should have a password policy in place with a minimum 8 characters. Any password you use should be 8 characters with upper, lower numbers and symbols. And I tell people you should actually
I have to write it down.
You shouldn't give it to anybody. And if you want to use a password manager, I'm going to embed this in the presentation. The best one out there is LastPass. I think they might even have a free version. I know they have a personal version. I use the corporate version, and I recommend it to our clients. I use it all the time. It creates the passwords for you. It stores them very securely, much more secure than you ever could. You just want to make sure that these passwords are, and a technique you can use to remember them is, I have to change my password every 90 days at work. So,
such a pain.
Oh, it is. But I've found a way it works. Like, I think of an initiative I'm doing this 90 days or now, and I create a sentence, and I mess up one of the characters, becomes a 0 instead of a O, or a 3 instead of an E. But it's this long. I mean, I mean, I can tell you, some of them I've had in the past for some of our systems. We put in a new system for efficiency in ticketing and all that other stuff, and the password was, I love my new efficiency system, with some numbers at the end, and I have to type that in every time, but it's very easy to remember. It doesn't have to be that long. My Amazon one used to be buy it now with an exclamation point, because that's what you do with Amazon. You buy it now, right? So it makes it easier, But anyway, that's just a suggestion. You should never email your work products to a personal email account. Remember, Google reads every single email that you send at Gmail. Metadata, something you should understand about that. When you create a Word document, there's all this data underneath the Word document. Who created it, the IP address they're on, when they created it, what changes they made. That's called metadata. Oh. The way you strip that out is to convert it to a PDF, and all that goes away. The legal community found this out years ago when they started emailing their adversaries Word documents. The adversaries opened up the Word document, looked at the metadata, and said, why did the partner get involved on this line? Why did they change this word to that word? And they could glean their strategy based on the metadata.
So what do you do?
So now it's illegal to do that in the legal system.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, the lawyers can't do that.
Is that the information when, I'm sorry, you're doing an edit and the little box pops up when you send it back to the other person? You can see what the change is. It similar to that?
Similar to that, exactly. But it's got a lot more underneath it as well.
So if we're, like, in general, we only send PDFs, but there are situations where we have to send active, like, working files to share with other clients. Is there a way to prevent that information? How does it work?
Yeah, there's software you can buy to do that. Would redact that. Yeah, it's not that expensive. It's about $35 a year per user. We have law firms that use that all the time. It's pretty powerful software too, because it'll redact things, based on a whole bunch of criteria.
Oh, cool. Interesting.
But the easiest thing to do is convert it to a PDF. A lot of bad news. Here's the good news.
Yay.
The bad guys are brutally pragmatic. They like easy, soft targets, and there's plenty of them out there on the internet. Just like the burglars who just simply go to every house and turn the lock. And when they find one, they look around and they try and steal something. If you have a locked door and you have an NRA sticker in the window and you have a barking dog, you're pretty much not going to get burglarized, okay? So what you want to do is you want to be a hard target. You want to do some of these things that we talked about here. And here's the eye chart of all the things we talked about. You can get this on our website again under presentations, what you can do. Keep your antivirus and your systems updated, operating systems, Flash and Java and all that. Update all that stuff regularly. Don't use old XP computers. They're like Swiss cheese to a hacker. Back up your data. Use encryption with confidential data that you have on laptops. Change your passwords, make them strong, protect them. Unique individual passwords for everything. I have a different password for all. I think I'm up to about 300 systems now that I have to log into.
How do you remember them?
I don't. I use LastPass.
Ah, all right.
Yeah, but don't forget your LastPass password. They do have recovery techniques. You have to go through the process.
The one you got to remember.
Yeah, there's a pretty severe recovery process. You have to answer a lot of questions and all that stuff. It took about 15 minutes to set that up, because when I first set it up, I didn't do that. And I only had about 10 or 15 passwords in there, and then I forgot my password. So, so use LastPass and make each one unique, okay? This way, if they hack one password, then they don't have everything. And people buy passwords or give them away on the internet. You can actually look on, there's a site, have I been pawned or something like that, PWND. My password's been hacked. And you can put your email address in, and it's a service that crawls the dark web and tells you all of the places that your password has been exposed. So I checked mine out recently, and Netflix, a whole bunch of them that have been hacked. Not Yahoo, another famous hack. My data was on there. But Dropbox had been hacked, my password. But since then, I had changed it. Changing your password is the most important thing. Like the Iranian nuclear facility, had they changed the default username and password, when you open up the book, the first thing it says is change the password, and they didn't change the password. We wouldn't have been able to do what we did with the nuclear program. Never email your work products to a personal account. Don't use flash drives you found. Wipe your smartphone before you get rid of it. Never use public USB charging stations. So now you can plug into these public USB charging stations.
I use my cords.
Not a good idea.
Really?
Yeah, because they found hackers unscrew those when nobody's looking, put a little wireless device in there, and then they sit around and they can get on that. If it's a phone, they can get on the phone.
Oh, great.
Oh yeah. It's circuitry about that big.
Charge at home.
Yeah. Use your plugged-in charger into an outlet. Use that instead.
So it's just the direct USB.
The direct USB.
I use my cord. I never use one of those public things.
You use your
my own cord.
charger with that's the thing to do.
So just having the plug.
Right. Just
can
plugging.
Prevent that from happening.
You have no idea what you're plugging into.
Wow.
It's completely invisible, And hackers they've found hackers unplug those things, put a little circuit about that big. It's nothing. I mean, this technology, skimming credit cards and all that, I mean, it's just incredible what they can do. They hack ATM machines. I just saw that they were hacking some kind of a vending machine that took credit card. Oh, parking systems.
Oh, like a money meter?
When you go to put your parking thing in, they found little things that go on there that are almost invisible. That as you swipe your card into the parking thing, they're also swiping the card. They come back and they take all the credit card numbers.
Oh my God. I know, I just used one of those.
I never have cash.
I never
But some of them won't take cash anymore.
Yeah, I know. Well,
because I
the thing
use
of it is,
cash, but
again, to be aware that why is there two little things here instead of one?
With two little things on the side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Looks like they've just plug it right onto the thing there. It looks like it's part of the thing.
So it's double.
It shouldn't have an additional unit on the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a skimmer, they call it. You can buy those pretty inexpensively.
Someone got me on one of those on an ATM.
doors and stay out.
ATM, same
I
thing.
used a shady ATM at a truck stop. Sure enough, I got a phone. I told the 76 in Bloomsbury. Just went to go get cash for the townwide garage sale. I did. It said the one place I carry cash is garage sales. Sure enough, 2 hours later, I got a call. Was I trying to buy something from a Walmart in Arkansas?
Oh my goodness.
No, I'm not. Well, they just made 3 purchases under your name.
Yep.
Oh. There, I got mine. Here. Got fast.
Beware of the phone scams. Don't fall for those. Convert sensitive files to PDF. Only use secure portals when you transmit your personal information. Never use free music, video sharing sites. My brother-in-law said, "Why does your daughter pay 99 cents a song? We pay 15 cents." I said, "Where do you pay 15 cents?" It was a Russian site. Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't think Taylor Swift got any of that 15 cents. Beware of unsolicited links and attachments. Don't click on anything unless you're absolutely sure it's safe. Check your bank accounts daily and your credit cards at least monthly. And in business, make sure you do that, because business accounts, if you don't report the breach within 24 hours, it's gone.
Really?
Totally gone. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Personal we're protected. The government is legislated. We need to be protected, but many businesses have gone out of business because they've been hacked. And there's one famous one, a construction company in New England. They hacked into their account and they stole not only the $200,000 in the operating account, but the $400,000 on the credit line. It went to a bank in China, and they were not only responsible for the $200,000, but the $400,000 on top of it. They went out of business.
Well, clear. Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, it's happened many times. Yeah. Download and configure Trusteer Rapport. This is something that will help protect against these viruses on banking sites. But sometimes Trusteer doesn't work that well with certain sites, we find now. So that's it. And there's some other techniques we can talk to you about. There's a Cisco service that will protect you against these ransomware things. And the other day, 2 weeks ago, I have this program that any site that I try to go to, it goes out to Cisco. Cisco checks to make sure it's not a ransomware site or a bad site, and then it allows me to get to that site. And 2 weeks ago, I went to pay a personal tax bill that I had. I said, well, let me go online and do it. So I typed in njtaxation.com, and bam, it came up and said, this site is riddled with malware. We're not letting you go there. I'm like, really? Taxation site? Well, I had typed in njtaxation.com instead of .org.
Oh.
So somebody had chosen that domain name and put up a site.
Genius.
Probably it looks just like NJ
Wow.
Taxation. So that's it. Sorry I went a little bit over, but
good.
you've been a great,
Thank you.
very attentive
Yeah,
audience.
that was great.
Thank you.